Welcome, welcome everyone to another episode of Campus Debates Season 2 by the Debate Association of Kenya. My name is Mercy Vugutsa. It's an honor and a privilege to be your host this season, and I love every single person who gets to join us every Monday at 8 p.m. So you who has just tuned in, thank you so much for tuning in to KTN Home Campus Debates Season 2. Now, I know you're wondering what Campus Debates really is about, and if this is your first time, here's a bit of information about Campus Debates. It's a show where we get to interact on subjects and topics that affect me, affect you, and anyone else that lives around you or that you get to interact with every day. And the most unique thing about Campus Debates is that we get to hear everything from the perspective of young people. We know that young people can contribute so much towards society in regards to the problem-solving capacities that they have, the information that they have within their brains, and most of all, the ability to engage with anyone and everyone, despite the fact that they have their own slang because they're Gen Zs, ideally. Now, this second half of the season looks a bit different. Instead of a team getting 3 points when they win and a team getting 1 point when they lose, for this second half, if you win, you get 3 points, and if you lose, you get 0 points. And at the end of this preliminary round, we'll be able to analyze which teams have the highest points, and those teams get to move to the quarterfinals and the rounds that get to follow after that. But the teams that do not, sadly, they might have to go home, but you'll get the opportunity to see them from the audience side. Now, for tonight, we have 2 amazing schools joining us in this debate. From side proposition, we have Tangaza University, and from side opposition, we have African Nazarene University. Their faces are not unfamiliar to you. You have seen them debating. You know their capacity. You know how brilliant they are in their arguments. But before I take the shine away from them, I will allow them to introduce themselves and tell you something interesting and something different from what they told you in their previous rounds. Proposition.
As usual, I'm Alexander Buliba, student at Tangaza, a math chemistry teacher. I've just heard somebody trying to say organic claps. So we shall draw one organic compound there so that he can be able to answer for us. To me, I'm very fascinated about debates, and the thing I love most is football. So those who are supporting Arsenal, don't depend on other teams so that you can win the league. Thank you.
Hello, hello. My name is David Onyango from Tangaza University. What makes me happy is the fact that I ascend upwards, irrespective to the force of gravity. So I am disobeying that law. That's what makes me proud today. Thank you.
I think side proposition is filled with scientists, because from the first speaker, apparently they love chemistry and they love coming together with organic compounds and things like that. And from the second speaker, their idea is to defy gravity, which I think is related to physics, and it's fine. So from side proposition, we have scientists, and now I will allow opposition to introduce themselves.
Nina Wairimu here. By now we're all aware I study landscape architecture. Something interesting about me would be that I am a plant mom. I love any form of vegetation, any form of plants. Keep them safe, preserve them wherever you are. Let's not pollute. Let's be more aware of what we're doing to our environment, because it helps us all in the long run.
Michael Daniel Donaro, and I think I've told you guys everything. Oh, but fun fact, I can actually skateboard and ice skate and roller skate. Yeah.
And from side opposition, we are joined by an environmentalist and a skater. I think that makes a perfect combination, but you're going to be the judges of that as per the arguments that they give us in the round that is to follow. With that, I will welcome our lovely panel of judges to introduce themselves and tell us something interesting about them.
Hi guys, my name is Mary Wairimo. I'm a young economist. Fun fact, I swim in financial matters, but I can't swim, but I learn. It's a goal.
My name is Perez Ngono. I am a retired speaker or debater,
and all the best.
My name is Brian. I'll be a panelist in this round. And unlike my fellow panelists, I have life skills. I can swim, and I can also ride a bicycle. Yes, but they are very fun fact. The show is growing wings to Tanzania. Thank you so much for Tanzania National Debate Council for always supporting the show with your viewership. And on this show today, we do much more better from the speakers on stage. All the best.
And for the judges, we have some with life skills, others who've just quit debating, and others who are willing to learn the art of swimming in real life, but for now they can swim in financial matters, and that's all that is important. Now, the judges are ready, the speakers are ready. I think the only person holding you back is me. So the motion for this round reads, this House opposes the use of public funds to finance excessive or unnecessary travel expenses for public officials. This House opposes the use of public funds to finance excessive or unnecessary travel expenses for public officials. So if you want to join the public office, I think this motion will be very important for you to understand whether the people should fund your travel expenses, extravagant expenses that is, or if the public can use that money for far much better things. With that, I introduce the first speaker proposition side to begin their argument. Here.
I'll begin by reading the motion, which says, this House opposes the use of public funds to finance excessive or unnecessary travel expenses for public officials. The first I will do is to break down this motion so that we can understand it better. So the first key terms here, we have the public funds. These are simply money and finances, resources that belong to government and especially to the citizens. Finances, money accrued from various ways such as taxations, borrowing, and etc. Excessive traveling or unnecessary travelings, these are travelings which does not give good feedback to the people. Then we have expenses, using of finance to facilitate 1, 2, 3. Then public officials, these are elected leaders, mayors, ambassadors, and etc. So as the member of proposition, I stand here to support this motion that from today on forwards, we should not use our public funds to finance excessive travelings for the public officials. The reason being, this kind of motions resembles a newborn baby who is struggling to walk. But in the process, he or she sees a slithering snake and begins to copy-paste whatever that snake does by slithering. But at the end of the day, the child fails to walk. The parents begin complaining that my child has been bewitched. It's only what they copy-pasted that has made this child not to move. What am I saying? We as a country, we are in a country that's a third world country. We don't have adequate resources. And if we are using the little funds to finance our public officials in unnecessary travels, then we are bringing more harm to the citizens of our republic. First and foremost, the reason why we are not advocating for this is simply because we are looking on opportunity cost. Opportunity cost, those who did business at their own levels can understand what an opportunity cost is. Prioritizing the best for the nation and for the citizens who are the taxpayers. When we go for opportunity cost, we are advocating for economic development. We want a country that is moving forward, not a country that is taking their leaders for off-peak, not a country that is taking their leaders for benchmarking, which at a point are not even beneficial to the citizens themselves. You take somebody or a leader to go for a benchmarking, which to us may look so unnecessary, to see something ambitious or something very elephant, something bigger, you bring it back to our third world country, it cannot be implemented. And in the case, the money had been used to do or to take this leader or public officer outside the country. Meaning we are only wasting the little resources we gain through taxes that you at home and you watching me pays. Again, my friend Anaro, as one of the participants here, it is you, the citizen, who work harder, go for casual jobs such as Mijengo to get a little money. You get about 500 shillings, and this is the money that has been taxed. You get back home with around 450 shillings, you buy the little, then you see that the work of your hand, the little money you've been taxed on, you see your leaders moving up and down, going abroad for unnecessary trips. And we are forgetting to develop our own country for sustainability. So in this scenario, why are we going for opportunity cost? Opportunity cost, if we prioritize the best things for us, the money that could have been used for traveling can be used to improve public transport and infrastructure. You, this individual citizen, who is even going for the casual job, I know you are walking in paths which are very dangerous. The roads are very dangerous. You cannot even navigate properly. If we use this money that our officials are using for unnecessary things, we can bring them for transport or transport development. Then again, we will enhance social services among ourselves. Then the most important thing is economic development and good standard of the people. This money that we are misusing, let us take it for proper development of our needs so that we can get good facilities, we can get good treatment so that we improve our life. Thank you.
Lovely start from side proposition, defending the idea of them actually opposing having this whole funding public travels for these public officials. From side opposition, I welcome the first speaker to rebuttal and also let us know what their argument is on their side. Hear, hear.
Panel, there are a couple of things that the previous speaker has gotten wrong, and that would skew the emotion in their favor, and that is what we cannot accept. They come and defend that excessive travel is something that does not give good feedback to the people. We rather understand that excessive travel or unnecessary expenses, as has been written in the motion, is something that is maybe not an essential service to the country. What does this look like? Traveling, but for purposes that are not about, let's say, food allocation or maybe poverty in the country. If somebody travels to attend a climatic summit, that can be considered as unnecessary because Kenya can choose to opt out of certain things, but they still choose to do that. That is what we're going to deem as excessive or unnecessary travel. The feedback is not the problem. It is the purpose of this visit that is the problem, right? Now, one, they come and tell us that we live in a third world country and there are lack of resources and therefore we cannot be compatible with the global arena. But they don't understand that it has been decades, if not a jubilee, since we attained independence. We cannot continue living in an economically stagnant state. We cannot live in perpetuity saying that, well, we're a third world country and we cannot compete and we don't have the money. It is time to take initiative, take a stance, and look at strategic planning for the greater development of the nation. Right. Now, they tell us that, one, public funds should prioritize essential services over travel. Inherently, he said that this money can be used for infrastructure, it can be used for trade and what have you. Now, if I can prove to you that these visits, in and of themselves in the long term, will still bring back those goals, then we already win this debate because we have shown you that development happens. Now, why don't we oppose the use of public funds to finance excessive travels? Because, one, there are strategic, diplomatic, and economic incentives that come into play. Characterization of this is that public officials are currently operating in an interconnected global environment. The current arena has technology, transport, and developed infrastructure that allows various nations to actually interact and interconnect. We cannot live as an island. Diplomatic pleasantries, rather, can lead to tangible economic effects. What do I mean by this? Direct negotiations and personal interactions leads to a certain state where remote communication cannot achieve. This leads to trust and capacity building between various officials from various different countries. And when we get that, we get more bilateral agreements coming to Kenya. We get more foreign investments and more diplomatic relations enhanced. Consider trade missions where officials will go and negotiate for open markets, right, for national business. The initial expenditure that we get, yes, is going to be considered maybe excessive if people need to travel. But the overturn of this comes back tenfold because we have attracted investments, we have opened markets, we have lessened the toll that some Kenyans pay to pay for certain ventures. And therefore, as a whole, the government has a greater capacity to care for its people. Remember, they say that you need to take care of your people. But right now, as they have said with their own words, they don't have the money to do so. 1.9 million people in Kenya currently are living below the poverty line and need a certain form of help from the government that they are not receiving because we do not have that money. So in their world, they still won't receive that help anyway. At least from these travels and these visits, we attract some form of investment that allows the government to help these 1.9 million people, to help these capacities and help improve infrastructure. Right. We need to understand that professional development and knowledge exchange is important. We bite the bullet by saying that, yes, some of these public funds will be used to fund these travels, and they may have been used in other sectors like food and security and what have you. But that continuous professional development of public officials is crucial for effective governance. The people who are leading the country need to have a certain form of knowledge, a certain form of vigor, a certain form of wit that you're going to get from those benchmarking visits where you look at countries that are performing at a better level than you and seeing how you can apply it to your own country. So if we enable officials to learn from the successes and failures of other countries, then we adapt these relevant frameworks in our own country, then you cannot say that third world countries cannot compete or are incompatible with the global scale. That simply does not work. Capacity building and professional development is paramount, right? We need to understand that in an era of global interdependence, swift and effective crisis management requires that form of on-the-ground coordination. Look at COVID-19, for example, when public officials had to travel to China in order to collect data on this virus and this pandemic and negotiate deals that allowed us to have vaccines, that allowed us to push for things like social distancing and enabled us to have certain mechanisms that helped us counter this pandemic. That form of crisis management cannot come about if the country chooses to work as an island, if the country only chooses to pursue only the necessary travels, because understand, their best case scenario is that stagnation of the economy. They will continue to live from hand to mouth, where it's those taxes that are going to be used to help the people, and nothing is going to come in the long run. There needs to be a balance of what is going to help us in the long term and what is going to help us now. And we believe that these travels, however expensive they are still going to bring about tenfold the investments that we put into it. And lastly, in my last minute, the opposition to public funding for official travel does not come from the money itself. It comes from an issue of transparency and accountability with the people. The people don't know why we're traveling. The people don't know what the purposes of these things are. So rather than outright opposition, we propose rather to have effective mechanisms that actually bring this information to the people, where the media can tell you that this travel is happening for this objective and these are the expected outcomes, where the people have a say in what is going on and what are the expected objectives, right? As I finish, I'd like to say that my partner will come and say the rest, but it is important for us to not look at ourselves as a third world country in perpetuity. It is important for us to believe that we can develop, and certain sacrifices in the short term can lead to effective change in the long term. Thank you.
It has proved to be a fiery round for these particular debaters on set today, because from side proposition, the arguments were very solid in regards to defending the whole idea as to why we do not need that, we do not think that we can fund these public travels and things like that. From side opposition, it's been very clear that they think it's beneficial at a point in time where we receive any level of benefit from these travels as a whole. With that, we have come to the end of the first half of this particular show. We are going for a short break, very few minutes, and we'll be back with the second half of the debate, where the debaters will get to engage with you further on the whole idea for whether we should actually oppose funding travels by public officials, or we should continue with these particular travels because they're beneficial to us. See you in a few minutes. Hello everyone, and thank you for hanging back for the second half of Campus Debate Season 2, this particular episode. The teams that are before us tonight are African Nazarene University and Tangaza University, both arguing for this house opposes the use of public funds to finance excessive or unnecessary travel expenses for public officials. If you're just joining us, a recap for what happened was that side proposition argued that the lack of adequate resources within the state do not justify in any way funding these unnecessary travels, and their idea for what unnecessary looks like is if a travel doesn't have any feedback to the citizens that exist in that state. From side opposition, however, they describe unnecessary travels as things that are not necessarily a priority to the state. And their argument is that at a point in time where we live in a globalized nation and we need diplomatic ties, then it is justified for us as a public to actually finance these unnecessary and excessive travels from public officials. It's been interesting and it's been engaging, but I know they have more in store for you. With that, we welcome the second speaker proposition to continue their argument. Hear, hear.
In every world people live in, there is something known as waste and useful. I hope all of you understand that. This motion is talking about unnecessary. They are telling us about a useful part. The useful part now is the necessary. For example, going for the vaccine of COVID-19, that is very necessary. We can fund that. For example, for going signing documents, we can do that. But panels, as you are here, our nation as a country, you hear governors going to our neighboring countries to see how they drink tea in their parliaments. Is that necessary? Very unnecessary. Somebody goes for an event in US just for benchmarking. We have ambassadors. What are the work for ambassadors? We have technology. What's the work for technology? Call them, use a video chat, see how the country is developing. These people are really not giving us an opportunity to develop and even feed our hungry nation. We are not saying that as a third world country, we don't have opportunities. We have opportunities to go for those necessary things like signing documents. Let's give a scenario. How do you move from here to a US with the 200 million shillings? Is that even logic? That money comes from our pocket. Then you'll come out here telling us that we don't have money, we need to tax Kenyans. You are wanting to raise the tax, yet you have already used 200 million. Take that key. Before I continue, I'll start with a very simple quote that says, the responsible use of taxpayers' money is paramount. Public officials should be held accountable for every dollar spent on travel. I think the first lady talked about she's an environmentalist. Let me give you a chemical statistical about that. Anytime you travel from here to Mombasa, you use almost, the carbon you release is almost 1.2 metric tons. So what are you doing to the environment? You're already destroying the environment. So already you are not giving us a good preservation of the environment if you are telling us to just travel for a benchmarking. What benchmarking, my friend? Just protect the environment by implementing new ways of not going to those trips. We have technology, and some trips are even not necessary. Some trips just are there for them to go with their family so that they can enjoy, have drinks, then they come back and tell you they have a benchmarking. Monitoring and auditing should be done on these trips so that we see their necessary part and we see our necessary part if it's important. If they will be able to prove to us that those unnecessary trips will be beneficial to the lives of the citizen, we agree with them. But if they are not doing that, my friend, stop joining their side and just come tell them that you are going the wrong direction. Secondly, I want to talk about misuse and abuse of funds. These people abuse a lot of funds. In their world, they're telling us that we allow them to go so that corruption can grow. That's the first rule. Because if they're using this fund, who is paying that? It's me, you, and the people outside there. So these guys should now tell us how those funds will be useful to the society as we are talking. Now, I've talked about technological as an alternative because she was talking about COVID-19, and that's just to nullify your point about them going to the vaccine. Already, we have a lot of graduates in this world, mostly in Kenya, who have already learned about viruses. They could be able to do that research. But we still had to pay for them to go because we had no more information. I agree. But who came again to do that research and get the vaccine? The Chinese. So you are creating more unemployment to the youths who have already learned in this country. So these guys should join us and stop saying that they are protecting environment. I'll give you another thing that my fellow members are not understanding. These things are having financial waste. A research by Australian government, they found that trips only cost 1 billion. Assuming that trip was not done, what development could have been done here in Kenya? Constructing this road will be have done, because some of the trips by they naturally, to me, I'm not speaking to the rest, to me, they are very unnecessary. You cannot tell me, I was hearing news the one day that the parliament went to Uganda to check the tea they drink. Then they came here and they wanted more tea. Last week we were hearing there was our former president saying he needs 14 cars. What are the need for those 14 cars? Those now are the unnecessary things that can support our nation, because we want that money to develop our country, not the money to go and develop other countries. Because if you're moving from here to US, it means you are just going to benchmark. You have gone there as a tourist. You will pay there some little amount. So these guys, I'm really pitying you. But with the, all said, I want you just to agree with me and say that you have not fulfilled your mission of giving us the real issues that are contentious. So prove to us how this will be accounted to the society and how it will be important. Are you against technology for just extravagance events? Thank you, and I rest my case. Proud to oppose. Alexander Buliba.
The scientists are ready to win this round, but I do not know whether the environmentalist and the other speaker will allow them to actually win this round. With that, we welcome the second speaker side opposition to rebuttal and at the same time engage with the motion further. Hear, hear.
Panel, understand that the school of thought being chased upon by the proposition is the reason why our country is still a degenerative economy. It's the reason why still in society we cannot afford to move on. They fail to actually understand what diplomacy is. They fail to understand that diplomacy exists. It is my appeal to the President and the Ministry of Education to put diplomacy as a necessary skill and subject in their country for people like them to understand why you need to travel, why physical rapport is actually important for trust and bonds to be created. I begin. The reason why we apparently are for these funds to be used to finance these travels and expenses, one, strategic diplomacy. Strategic diplomatic and economic incentives are actually achieved and public officials operate in an interconnected global environment. Diplomatic pleasantries can lead to a tangible and economic strategic benefit. How is that apparently pulled across? Direct negotiations and personal interactions can lead to agreements that may not be possible through remote communications. We are definitely in the third world country, in a third world continent. That is very true. However, it doesn't mean that it restricts us from developing as a country. It doesn't mean that. Why? Because if we consider trade missions where officials negotiate terms that open market for national businesses, initial expenditure on travel is actually recovered tenfold via the increased exports and foreign investments and economic partnerships that are actually seen. Cost-benefit analysis. Ergo, what our president just did a while back, going to the States and came back with more goodies that were actually seen. So they were not apparently misused. They were accounted for because we know what he came back with. The figures were seen. All right. Strategic presence and influence. And this is going to reiterate on that whole technology point that they're trying to tell us apparently. But I understand that the geopolitical landscape necessitates the physical presence of public officials to assert national influence and commitment. If that wasn't the case, then we wouldn't be having ambassadors and diplomacy stations in every country out here. Understand that this isn't about opulence, but rather maintaining and projecting power and seriousness on the global stage. That is what is seen. We are trying to create an image. That is the answer that we're trying to put across. Therefore, attendance of critical international events, e.g. the UN General Assembly, e.g. G7 Summit, is not merely just being symbolic, but also strategic. Why? We create political alignments. That's something that they fail to understand. It is signals that the nation's active participation in policy making and global governance, apparently being present during such things such as the climate change, G7 Summit, again, will actually influence outcomes that align with the national interest of that country. Because, panel, understand this. In our world, we have two actors that are being put in state here. The state itself, the government, and the people. We are trying to tell you that the people apparently are the guiding compass that we use. And it's because the state is there as present, we are using that as a tool to bring in much more benefit and impact to the people. Bilateral relations often pave the way for strategic partnerships and defense alliances that cannot be achieved through virtual meetings. I'll take you up here why. However, understand this. This is the preempt that they're going to bring across. Understand that they're going to talk about, one, travel expenses are often misused and lack transparency. And we tell them, rather than the outright opposition, the focus should be on enhancing transparency and accountability. Yes, we can actually tackle climate change from Kenya as we are. We do not deny that. However, we believe that if we go there, present ourselves as a country, and see that, one, we'll have achieved climate change, two, we'll actually have created an alliance, and three, we'll have made a name for ourselves as a country that Kenya still apparently needs to develop. Understand that travel often they talk about traveling often serving personal rather than public interests. We are telling you this. Instituting a system that preemptively evaluates the outcomes of official travel can address this concern. Understand that officials should be required to report on the objectives, activities, and results of these trips. Therefore, what do we tell you? That in the end, we are seeing that there is accountability being achieved, there's progress being achieved, and there's development. The only way they can prove that apparently these wins is if they tell us that these funds that are called being misappropriated, if it can actually achieve the long-term benefit that our world presents to you. With that, we rest our case. Thank you.
Oh, I know as a panel or someone who has been watching this particular show, the debaters are ready and they're willing to fight for and possibly even die for the possibility of funding these travels excessive and unnecessary for public officials. Quick question before we go on a short break. You as an audience, if you were a public official, would you want the people to actually fund your unnecessary and excessive travels, or do you think you'd actually choose to sit back and wait within your country at a point in time where your travel is not important? Feel free to engage with us on X at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates, or message us on WhatsApp through the number 0759 434389. See you after a short break. Welcome back to the third half of Campus Debate Season 2, this particular episode where we have African Nazarene University debating against Tangaza University. If you missed the first two halves of this particular debate, I'm sure you've missed so much, but here I am to offer you some saving grace where I give you a recap for what happened in the first half and the second half. Now, the debaters have argued that they do not think that we need to actually fund excessive and unnecessary travels for these public officials and things like that. So from side proposition, their argument is that we are a developing state, we do not have money, therefore we don't have any capacity to actually fund these travels in and of itself. And their biggest arguments are that their definition of what unnecessary looks like are things that do not offer any positive feedback or things that benefit the people that are traveling more than the citizens themselves. From side opposition, however, their argument is that all these travels are important for diplomatic capacity and strategic diplomacy and things like that. Their argument is that it is only through these travels that we get to engage on a global space with different countries and different entities and to assert power, dominance, and create an image for these countries as a whole. I think the debate boiled down to a few things, and the most important thing is, what do you think determines what necessity looks like and what excessive actually looks like? Is it the amount of money that is going to be used, or is it the benefit that actually comes from these travels as a whole? But with that, the judges, having these similar questions in mind, have decided that they think they need to ask a question to each team for them to be further convinced on whether we need to actually fund these travels by public officials. With that, I will welcome the judges to ask a question to proposition and a question to opposition. Judges?
All right, my question goes to side proposition, which is very simple. How expensive is expensive when it comes to these unnecessary travels? Is the money that is going to be saved from that travel enough to make any impactful contribution to society?
Question will go to side opposition. What is the framing of unnecessary, and where does unnecessary reach? What is the limit of unnecessary? And if unnecessary is unnecessary from your perspective, then resting is very important, but it is also very necessary. Tell us if you would also finance public officials for that. Thank you.
The debate has become a debate on semantics. What is necessity? What is excessive? With that, I welcome side proposition to respond to the question that has been asked by the judges. Here.
I think we should call the chat GDP so that questions can be more harder, not as easy as I've been asked. But to my judge, I've already told you the financial waste that was seen in Australia of 1 billion. And I will also ask you a question. If that 1 billion is picked and placed here to build roads, will it not be enough? It will be enough. Let me use an example of the late trip that occurred of 200 million. He used a private jet from another country. If he could have used our normal jets, that money could be enough to even pay teachers who are still in strike, to pay the caregivers and the other nurses who are in strike. That money is very useful. And I will now give you why the opposition lose this motion. We are saying that the necessary trips are very okay. For example, if you are going on those trips for diplomatic signing of documents, fine. But they should pass through what? Audits and approval. Because these people will still do the same thing, which is not known as corruption. They will pretend they are going there, yet they have carried 50 people, and those 50 people will cause another billion of money. So they should be able to answer to us, how will that money of them going just there to have fun? You know, even me here, I'm just having fun. So I've used my own money. Let the government also sometimes, if they want to go to US, let them use their own money, so that that money can also feed the hungry and also build our nation. Let them give us an example of developed countries whereby they use more traveling. US, they never come here a lot. China, they never come here a lot. Their presidents never step here a lot. But you find us as Africans, we want to go and go and go. We shall reach the end of the world. Thank you.
When we talk about unnecessary, we mean issues that are directly affecting the Kenyans, issues that are directly affecting the people of this nation. Things like food, things like security, those can be deemed as necessary. But then there are certain visits that Kenya opts to get into. There are certain visits that Kenya chooses to do, even though they do not directly affect the needs of the people. When I talked about the COVID-19 pandemic and the trips we took to China, that pandemic could still have been handled locally. We could have still stayed within the country and chosen further methods of hygiene and social distancing. That still could have been achieved, but we chose unnecessarily to go. But we can see that the outcome of that was that we got a lot more funding, we got a lot more vaccines, people actually got more help. Now, you also asked if resting for these public officials is something that needs to be funded. That one, I say we believe that once you finished your 5-year tenure, you can still rest on your own. That is not something that the people are there for. You've been put into office to work for the people. If you choose to rest, rest will come at the end of your tenure. We also need to understand that a financial committee already exists and budgets for money to be allocated to certain sectors of the nation. So they cannot come and tell us that we are taking money from certain sectors. They cannot give us inflated figures that lack statistical basis and speculate on the millions, if not billions of shillings that are being used, yet they cannot prove it. So they cannot say that we're taking money from that. And rather, resting and all that has been asked only exists at the end of your tenure. When you finished your 5 years as an official, you can choose to rest. That is not the duty of the people. Thank you.
They have put their best foot forward, with African Nazarene University arguing that you should actually fund these excessive and unnecessary travels. And on the question of semantics, they've defined necessity as a travel that doesn't necessarily look like something that is proximate to the needs of a state or something that the state is currently going through. For side proposition, Tangaza University, they've been able to clarify to you what excessive travel actually looks like. It looks like using a lot of money that you can actually opt out of for a travel. And their definition for that, or rather the benefit that you can get from that, is that you could allocate that money to build roads and help people that are currently striking and things like that, which means for both sides, there's some level of solvency for both teams. But I do not know whether they swayed you or not, or whether these definitions of semantics are beneficial or not. With that, we welcome the audience and the judges to give us feedback for the round. For the audience, you get to vote on a poll that is going to go up at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates on X. But for the judges, we get to hear the verdict right now, right here. Judges?
On a unanimous call, Tangaza University takes the win over Africa Nazarene. And this is the reason why. The context of how the panel understood excessive and unnecessary from an average intelligent voter is, for example, members of parliament going to Uganda to benchmark how they take their cup of tea. That is how they understood unnecessary. And then they understood excessive from the point that these people can go into their pockets to literally fund their expenses, but they just decide to disturb the treasury to keep on funding them. And based on that context, we felt that Tangaza actually won the debate. Secondly, when you look at how they talked about the impacts to the society or the climate change and agendas, is that you tend to emit a lot of carbon footprint the moment you opt to go for the unnecessary kind of travels or this excessive kind of travels. Something we need to give to ANU here is this. There was a point on corruption, and I felt that this clash was somehow won here, but I needed ANU to kind of bite the bullet with this. One, corruption comes in the sense that members of parliament frame this kind of travels that we are going to benchmark, yet they go with their families. So this is the corruption that they are saying does not need to be funded by treasury. But ANU says that we are a third world country, but we can literally strive higher and be in the likes or enclaves of the USA. That is to say that we need not to take tourism as a secondary sector. That is something that literally came out very well from their side. However, when we kind of look at the clashes and all that, we tend to think that even though we do not think that you need to use corruption or lying as a means to an end. Thank you.
Tangaza University gets to win this round, and with that, they've been able to garner for themselves 3 additional points. They have won their first preliminary round and their second preliminary round and this round as well, which means Tangaza currently has 9 amazing points for themselves. So hopefully we get to see them at quarterfinals and possibly the next rounds after that. For Africa Nazarene University, however, they've not been able to win this round for themselves, but hopefully we'll get to see them in the rounds that follow, either as audiences or as guests to this particular show. But it was an amazing debate that we had from Nazarene and Tangaza University, and it was amazing to have the teams here with us tonight. Now, the motion for today was that this House opposes the public actively funding unnecessary and excessive travels by public officials. And the question to you as the audience is, if you were a public official, do you think you would want us to actively fund your travels despite the fact that they are unnecessary and excessive? And I think this debate clearly emphasized what unnecessary and what excessive travels ideally look like. And so for the panel, they were convinced by the arguments from side proposition. And I think you as an audience, if you are not convinced, feel free to engage with us on X at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates. We have come to the end of the show tonight. It has been a lovely Monday, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And with that, we look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place, with me, Mombasa Road.